Okay. Okay, we're live. Looks like there isn't anybody here yet. Alrighty, so we'll just hang out for a while. Welcome to my channel, The Needlebug. And my name is Karen. And yes, my last name is Bug. So, oh, hi Kathy. Let's see who else is here. Let me move this to where I can see it better. Okay. Oh, sorry I'm a little late. I was having setup issues this afternoon, but I think we're good now. There we go. And Amy, hi Amy, and Gail. Good morning. Well, must be morning where you are. It's afternoon here. Oh, whew. Supposed to be cooler. Oh, Deborah, well, welcome. I'm glad it's your first time. I hope you find something of interest and that you like and that you will hang around and subscribe. Okay, looks like everybody's popping in now. That's wonderful. Oh, I thought it was supposed to be cooler here today, and honest to goodness, maybe it was my running around to get things set up, but oh, I think it's hot. Although, not as hot as some people have it, so um, we're fortunate in that respect. If you hear something running, it's my air conditioner. Uh, I wouldn't make it without it. Yeah, absolutely need that. I kind of thought today I'd talk a little bit about um, stitching on the diagonal and what how to start in each corner, because I'm reading in the group that people are unsure how to start in which corner and what corner should they start in. Oh, Patricia's welcome. I'm so glad you stopped by. And Amy, 6 o'clock in the UK. Oh, so I'm catching the evening folks at this point in time. So, anyway, I know that a lot of people get like, how do I do this? How do I know which corner to start in? Um, which should I start in? And there's all kinds of questions about the corners. So what I did, I have some 20 count 8 o'clock here. And what I did is these green marks actually represent a corner. Hi, Tori. Haven't seen you for a long while. Um, so I marked some corners uh, here so that I can show you how to start in each one. So we'll gradually move through them. Today I am using, this was my trouble with setup. I usually like to sit in my recliner chair because of my back issues, but that just wasn't working to get the right angle for my camera. So today I'm going to use my Patoki stand, and I think if I hold it up you can see that in the little picture at the bottom, which is great for when you're working at a table. In fact, I'm going to a day treat in 2 weeks, and this little puppy will be going along with me. Anyway, back to the corner issue. If you belong to the diagonal stitching group, there are some diagrams in the files. Now, they have a weird long number followed by the word JPEG. And I will try and go in and rename them for you. But there's examples for people that stitch and start their X in the bottom left to the top right. And then there's another diagram for people that start in the bottom right and go to top left. So I'm going to try and sneak this up under here. So they look kind of like this. And this corner, of course, most of you are familiar with because all of my Stitch With Me's and tutorials show this as the starting point. Okay. However, what I did is showed stitching from the top to the bottom of your diagonal. And then this next one in the middle shows if you want to work up the diagonal, how to start. And then I did the same for, okay, let me move it up here a little bit. For down here at the bottom, how to start at the top and work down, and how to start at the bottom and work up. And those drawings are for each corner using bottom left to top right as your way you make your X. And this is assuming that you are going to cross each X as you go. So these are in the file section, and they are there for your reference and your use. You can download them and do as you wish with them. But just in case, I'm going to show you, just in case, everybody learns differently. We all learn different. Yes, I'm one, I can read it. I can read it in a book or look at it on a piece of paper and say, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then when I go to do it, it's like, huh? What am I supposed to do? I need to see it done. So I'm just going to do a little bit of an away thread here. And I hope this is, let me see if I can zoom in just a little bit here. Here we go. No, I don't want to zoom in on me. I want to zoom in on this one. No. Oh, sometimes. Okay. That is about as far as I can get. Okay. All right. There we go. Okay. So I'm just going to use an away thread, and I'm going to come up in my bottom left, and I'm not going to do a lot with this corner because this corner I think is what everybody is, and then I'm going to pull the thread all the way through. Yes, Tori, this is a Patoki stand. Yes, and I really, really like it. Really like it. In fact, especially when you're sitting at a table and to take to retreats, and it holds a Q-snap or a hoop. I can't speak for scroll frames and this stand because I honestly do not know that answer. I don't use scroll frames as much as I really want to and would like to. I don't know. They're just not comfortable for me. So, in fact, Tori, I like it so much back in March, and I'm still not so patiently waiting. I ordered the floor stand, the floor hoop holder. So March, April, May, June, July. That's 4 months. I'm going to wait another couple weeks and then I'm going to email and see where I'm at in the queue as far as being able, as far as when my floor stand's going to be ready. So I'm not going to do a whole lot in this corner because, as I said, I think most everybody that works diagonal um, knows pretty much how to do this one. Of course, you're going to go across your 10 or 20 or however many, and then you're going to work down till you get down to this, and you're going to have that diagonal. I'm not going to fill it in, I'm just going to make a diagonal for you. Okay. So you will work down till you had one stitch. So you'd come over the 10 and gradually decrease one until you got down to one stitch. Then on this first one, I do not end any threads and restart them up here because that's just kind of foolish. I just carry my thread to where in this block I need it. Okay, and then of course you would work this diagonal down to here. Again, you have a choice. You can end them and go back up here and start, or depending on where they fall in this next diagonal, you can park them in that diagonal. Which brings up something else that I was having a discussion with. It was I think it was yesterday, about there was a person who was doing the diagonal and then she was parking in this next diagonal and starting at the top to work down, but then all these parked threads were getting in her way. Now, if you're doing row by row, stitch by stitch, yeah, they're going to hang there and they may or may not be in your way when you got to find a new place to park a thread. If you're doing as some people do, and it's perfectly okay, whatever method you come up with that works for you is perfectly fine. This is, when I started showing this, it was what I had come up with at the moment. And if you watch my videos back from the beginning, you're going to see that I changed this technique I don't know how many times. And I still look for different ways to do it. But if you're going to park in this next diagonal and you want to work by color complete within that diagonal, park here, but work your parked threads first. And start with your lowest parked thread, complete those stitches, and then either end it or park it in the next diagonal. Then go to the thread that is now the lowest. Do the same thing. Work it until you have worked all the stitches in that color. Park it in the next diagonal or end it, whichever your chart warrants. Sometimes it's going to be used in the next diagonal. Sometimes, you don't need that color anymore, so you end it off. Until you have all your parked threads worked in. Then go back and pick up the colors that are missing and fill those into the diagonal. And either, again, end them off or park them in the next diagonal. When you get to this next diagonal, do the same thing. Work your parked threads, the lowest one first. Work up till you have all your parked ones worked in, and then fill in with the colors that you didn't have parked. that makes, if you're going to stitch and not want threads in your way, and you still want to park, because sometimes, a lot of times, that makes more sense than ending off your color at the end of every diagonal. You know, I think a lot of, and myself included, a lot of us think, well, whichever uses the least amount of thread. If I have to skip too many stitches, I might end it off, because it might take more thread to travel and park as it does to end off and restart where I need it. So that's a judgment call on your part, and figure out which works the best for you. So that's off the corner issue a little bit, but it is another issue that people often have questions about. Of, well, I finished this diagonal, what do I do? Again, you play with it. There's no right and wrong. There is no rule that says you have to go 10 across, row by row, stitch by stitch, rethread your needle 100,000 times. There's no rules to that effect. Modify this to whatever works for you. So, as I said, this corner, we all pretty much know how to work the diagonal from your top left corner. Now, suppose I prefer to stitch from the bottom up. And I've talked about that quite a bit over the last couple of videos, and pardon me, there's a good reason to work from the bottom up. If you're not on a scroll frame, you're either working on a Q-snap or you're working on a hoop, and you start up here in the top right corner, as I did with Stitcher's Retreat. Now, Stitcher's Retreat was no small chart. That was 625 stitches wide by, oh my goodness, what was it? 700 and something, or 800 and something long. And I started at the top, in the top right corner, which is what I had always done. But what happened is, because I either use a hoop or a Q-snap, I had all this extra weight at the top of all this stitched fabric. And believe me, it gets heavy. It gets very heavy. So if you aren't having it on some sort of a frame, either you're a Lowry stand or a Patoki stand or whatever, whatever stand you use to hold that, it gets very heavy, and the hand that you hold it with gets really tired and tends to cramp, and it's not comfortable at all. So my suggestion to a lot of people was, start at the bottom and work up, because when you do that, all your weight of your finished fabric is in your lap. So you're not having to hold it up to stitch. It's all in your lap, which makes, in my mind, a whole lot more sense than trying to wrangle stitched fabric at the top of your Q-snap or at the top of your hoop. So with that being said, to start bottom up, well, let's go down here. Okay, to start bottom up, come on, and stitch that you're always working in a clean hole, you can do one of two things. You can start here in the corner. No, wait. I got the wrong, hold on. Here we go. Here we go. Okay. You can start here in the corner, 625 by 740. Thank you, Joyce. I knew it was darn huge, that's for sure. I couldn't remember exactly what it was. I knew it was 625 across, but I couldn't remember the length exactly. So thanks. If you want to start in the bottom left corner, you can bring your needle up in the corner and then stitch well, I actually wouldn't do that. My chart might be a little wrong here. I would actually count out 10 so that I can stitch always in a clean hole, which would be this way. I should have cut my thread and work across. I might have to fix these graphs. I did them out of just off the top of my head. Sometimes that's not always right. Okay, so you would you would count out your 10, and I'm not going to go all the way 10 across, I'm just going to do a couple. Okay, and you would work your 10 or 20 or however many wide you wanted to go. Okay, so that you're always coming up. And again, you're coming up in a clean hole. However, that being said, if you're color completing, it doesn't really matter. Okay. Now, then if I was going back across the next row, and again, I'm not going to go all the way over. I'm going to go up a row. And again, this assumes that you're doing each X one at a time. Okay, so see, you can still come up in the clean hole, go down, come up with just one thread, go down, and then that would be your 10. And then you would go up here again. And do the same thing. Go over. Now this time since you're in your first diagonal, you would go over just 8. Okay, and you continue up until you got to the top, and then everything else applies the same. You know, you would work it till you got up here to just one stitch. And then everything else would be the same. If you're going to park in this next diagonal, then, you know, park here. And since you're stitching bottom up, if you don't want these threads to be in your way and you're going to color complete, then you start with your highest stitch. Complete that. Then your next stitch, that's the highest, and complete that color. Then your next stitch, the highest, and complete that color until you get all your park threads worked in, and then you fill in. And Joyce does her diagonal stitching that way. And I believe, Joyce, you really like it that way, is my understanding. I wasn't doing that until and I will give Joyce credit where credit is due. She's the one that mentioned it to me, and I tried it, and I rather enjoyed that. You know, it gets your park threads out of your way. You can put them in your next diagonal if you so choose, or end them off, whichever works for you, and whichever you decide is best for you. And I really like that. So that's working from the corners on the right side of your fabric. Now, I'm sorry, that's working from the corners on the left side of your fabric. If you want to start on the right side at the bottom and work up, then, and again, it's completing one stitch at a time. And again, you can play with that and decide what works for you. But then I would start, let me get my mug out of the way here and move this over a bit. There we go. I would start in the corner itself and go one stitch at a time. Here we go. I've got extra fabric hanging over here. That's kind of crimping my style. Okay. And then you would work just the same way. You would work top right to bottom left. Yeah, that's right, Joyce. And then what she does is she works in all the park threads, then goes back and fills in all the missing colors in the rest of that diagonal, and that way there's no threads in your way. You can just keep on stitching, you know, and color complete. I will also mention one other thing that I found. I don't know how many of you have used the ballpoint needles. It's the ones with the little ball on the end, and Sullivan's now has them, and they come in packs of 2. And especially if you're going to color complete, as opposed to going row by row, stitch by stitch, I found the ballpoint needle keeps my stitches much, much nicer, because what happens is you don't split your threads when you're coming down or going up in a hole. With a regular tapestry needle, sometimes, and everybody's careful and tries not to do that, but sometimes we split our thread, and then the stitches don't look quite as nice. But with the ballpoint needle, it just slips right up there. There's no splitting of the thread, and I just have found my stitches to be a whole lot nicer since using them. Now, I had gotten some on Etsy, and I don't believe that they're there anymore. Before Sullivan's was distributing them. So I had gotten a bunch at that point in time, and then I also got Sullivan's. The ones I got, and I'm not sure if Sullivan's are or not, the ones I got are stainless steel. And to be honest, I have found that they don't tarnish on me the way some other needles do. Normally I use Bohins. Sometimes I will use John James. John James needles I can use for about a week, maybe 2, before they're turning black. Now, to try and get a little bit more use out of them, I have an emery cushion, and I will run them through that, and that will like polish them and sharpen them. But normally about 2 weeks is the max I get out of those. Bohins I can get a little bit more, maybe a month. But I go through a lot of needles that way. Now with the ballpoint ones, I don't have, I use the same ballpoint needle. I'm trying to remember. For at least 6 months, at least, and longer. So I don't go through. They're okay. They're pricier than other needles, but for myself, it's worth that price if I'm not going to have to change my needle all the time. So, I just throw that out there as something maybe you want to try. Again, it's up to you, just to let you know it's there. Okay, so here we are in the bottom right hand corner. So we're going to start in the corner, work over to 10, and then we're going to come back working 9. I'm just going to jump over here and work back. But you're going to do it the same way. You're going to work top right, bottom left, top left, bottom right. Yeah, and then the next row we would go up here. I'm not going to fill all these in. Kathy, I don't think so. I think doing a stitch at a time versus stitching all the way across a row and back, I really think the thread usage is about the same. I really don't think there is, if there is a difference, it's a very slim difference. Now, what I will say about, say you have a block of color, like I have a piece, was working on a piece that the whole page is black. Okay, so what do? Do you work in the diagonal for the black, or do you just, willy-nilly stitch through it, whatever your heart desires, do the whole page all the way across and all the way back? I mean, it's up to you. However, especially in blocks of color, if you stitch all the bottom leg and then come back and cross it in each column or each diagonal, you will probably end up getting a column line or a diagonal line. Because what happens is your first leg is, say you're working down your page. Your first leg is bottom left to top right. And you're going to do that all the way across your row. Okay? And then you're going to come back and cross them. When you're doing the next diagonal, you're going to do bottom left to top right. And when you get to where they meet, one stitch is pulling it to the left, pulling that hole to the left. One stitch is pulling that hole to the right, and it's that space that causes your column lines or your diagonal lines, which is why tension is extremely important. Because if you pull one side a little bit tighter than you pull the other side, you're going to end up making that hole a little bit bigger than it should be. So let me just do it here to show you. So this row, I'm going to pull this way. Okay, so I'm pulling that to the right. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way across. Say I went all the way across the row. and that bottom leg is pulling it to the right. Okay, so that's the first pull. Okay, so now I'm going to do this column, and I'm going to come over at it. So I'm going to do my top leg like this, or my bottom leg, I'm sorry, like this. So now remember, this first stitch here pulls it to the right. I'm going to go here. I'm going to come up here to cross these X's. And now I'm going to pull this thread to the left. Okay. So this hole here is now being pulled in two different directions. The bottom leg of this column is pulling to the right. The top leg of this column is pulling to the left. I may, depending on my tension, end up with a hole. And then if I do that in a straight line, I may very well have a column line or a diagonal line. So a lot of times completing one X at a time takes care of that you don't get those enlarged holes from tension. And again, that's why your tension is important. And and I've seen it on some of my works. Some days you're just really relaxed and in the zone, and your stitching is just going wonderful, and your stitches look great. And the next day you had a bad day. Everything went wrong. Everything you touched went to crap, and you sit down and stitch and you're just all tense, but you want to stitch because that helps you relax. And when you start, you're really yanking those stitches so that your tension is different. And it happens. It happens to all of us at some point in time or another. And it's one thing to just be aware of that, how that affects, especially when you're doing full coverage pieces, how that affects your work. I I saw it on some of mine. The other thing that makes a difference, and there was a point in time where I was, and I still do occasionally, playing around with, instead of sticking and stabbing, of doing the sewing method. And when you sew your stitches, as opposed to sticking and stabbing, they look different. They lay different. So that also can make your work not as consistent as what it is if some people do the sewing and that's all they do, and that's fabulous. It's wonderful. Some of us stick and stab, and then everything's good. And Barbara, or Kathy, I'm sorry, you're right. Life does happen, and that it's not that you intentionally have adjust your tension. It's just, it happens. And Barbara, you're right. Yeah, that's an advantage to doing one stitch at a time, because if you're having a tension issue, you're probably apt to catch it a little more quickly than if you were going across the row and back, and you might not see that until you have several rows done. where if you do one stitch at a time, you're probably going to notice it quickly. Yeah. And I have stitched, well, it's many a long year ago. I'm trying to remember back that far. I think when I first started stitching, way back in the cave days, I went across the row and came back. I did all the bottom leg and then came back with the top leg. But somewhere along the line, I started stitching 1x at a time. And I have done it that way for, wow, since back in the cave days. My very early cave days is when I did across and back again. But I think I did it that way for maybe 5 years or so. And then after that, I did 1x at a time, and I've been doing that ever since. And it didn't matter whether it was a solid color or a variegated color or what it was. I just stitched 1x at a time. And there is that thing about variegated colors. Oh, you have to stitch them 1x at a time. No, you don't. Stitch it the way you want. You stitch it 1x at a time. It gives you, you can see maybe the variegation a lot easier. However, if you stitch it, and again, it depends on what your project is, whether I would do this or not. But if I stitch the bottom leg and then come back and cross them all, it's going to give you a whole different look. And it just depends on what is the look that you want. It's going to give you more of a tweeted or heathered look if you don't do 1x at a time. And that variegation is going to be more blended, where each shade or whatever in the colors isn't going to stand out as much. So again, there's no rules, and there are no cross-stitch police out there, believe me. I've been stitching for, oh my, 50 years, something like that. And I haven't seen a stitching police yet. If they're out there, they're hiding pretty good. Because I haven't seen them. But the whole bottom line is find what works for you. Because what works for me, and I can sit here and I can show you different ways. You're right, Kathy. Thank goodness there weren't any out there. Oh my. But find what works for you. Find your happy place. Find, and this is what I said to the woman that I responded to about who didn't like all the threads in her way. And if she keeps coming back to stitching cross country within the column so that she doesn't have threads hanging, I suggested to her to try what we just talked about. But if that didn't work for her and she keeps going back to one color at a time through the column, and then the next color through the column, and the next color through the column, then that just might be her way. That should probably give her a good clue that that's what's going to work for her. And that's going to be her happy place. You'll find there will be a method that you keep resorting to. But try other things. Don't not try something because you just might find that you like that better. So do continue to try stuff. And that's the other myth that people get hung up on. if I start a project stitching on the diagonal and stitching in diagonals of 10 and crossing each X at a time and going stitch by stitch, that's the way I have to stitch the whole piece. I can't change that. So the next piece I start, I'm going to do this way. Well, you can do that if you want. But I'm going to sit here and tell you, oh, hi, Candy. I'm glad you found us. Um, I'm going to tell you my Stitcher's Retreat has probably every method known to man on it. And I switched. And I will also say you don't have to wait till you finish a page. Okay, say you're doing cross country by color on this page and you want to try diagonal. You don't have to finish that cross country page before you do the diagonal on the next page. You can put your diagonal lines in, work each diagonal and fill in the missing stitches and switch it right then and there. You don't have to wait till the next page to do any of it. You know, I even changed directions of the diagonal at a whim. I mean, I was stitching my diagonals from the top right to the bottom left. And I want to see what it's like starting in this bottom corner. So, you know, I found a place that it made sense and I started doing them from the top left to the bottom right. Well, I didn't like that either, so I switched to some columns. And yeah, I switched. I can't tell you how many times I switched. Then there were times I went back to cross country within the given area. You know, I'm not an extreme cross country person. That gives me the willies because I'm too afraid of miscounting. Even with the gridded fabric, too afraid of I'm going to miscount someplace and then I'm not going to find it till I have all this stuff filled in. And then depending on where it is, it doesn't matter if it's wrong. But depending on where it is, you do need to fix it. And how do I fix it? When I have too much filled in around it, I can't fix it. So extreme cross country makes me a little nervous. But I will do cross country within a section, like maybe for a 40 by 40 section. And I'll work that area, blending into those areas around it. In fact, it was back in the 80s before I really knew full coverage was a thing. And it was back in the mid 80s. I did about 5 charts by Barbara and Cheryl. And they're the ones that did historic places in South Carolina. They had Rainbow Row was one, Sunday Morning was one, Church Street was another one, and I did several of theirs, and they were full coverage, but that's exactly how I did them. I made copies of my chart and I cut it into sections, and I would stitch that section, and when I got close to where I needed the next section, I would then tape it back together so I could blend it from one end to the other and didn't have any, so I could avoid straight lines and just continue the color into the next part. Could you tell me where you purchase fabric? Oh, fabric already gridded you can get at 123 Stitch has it, and I think they sell it by the yard. Heaven and Earth Designs sells it. Let me think. There's many places on the internet that you can buy it. I would, however, recommend this with the gray lines, and this is by Zweigert. So if you just Google Zweigert gridded fabric in what count that you are interested in, it will come up. There's quite a few places that do ABC Stitch Therapy, 123 Stitch, Cross Stitch Collectibles, I think, has it. Yeah, and the fabric I have here is Easy Guide, and that's the kind by Zweigert. The kind by DMC is that Easy Grid, but that has the red lines on it. Just my personal preference is it is extremely heavily starched, and it is so stiff. And even I did a piece on that, and even after I washed it and pressed it, oh my goodness, it was still stiff as a board. And I personally, and again, this is my own personal opinion, there are people out there that love it, but my personal opinion is I do not. It's just too stiff. Kathy, the grid lines, the gray lines disappear in hot water. So when you're all done with your piece, and I forget which video number it is, I have a video on how to wash it. Magic Guide is DMC. Thank you, Candy. You're absolutely right. I have a video on how to wash it. You're actually going to put it in hot water, and you're going to let it soak for, I'm going to say, at least an hour, and that will take the gray lines out. But I did do a video on on how to do that on washing fabric. Honestly, I can't remember what number it is. It isn't too far back from the most recent ones. There was another question here. I missed it. Oh, what did I use to mark the grid on my fabric? These green lines. Let me get it. I'll show you. Oops. I got to be careful I don't trip over my cords here. Okay. This is what I use. It's a Bohin chalk pencil. Okay. And it's filled with, let me do, yeah. Oh, there we go. It has green chalk in it. And then you just, in fact, even this gridded fabric, I mark my lines because once you start stitching, they get hard to see. And I like this because it's just thin enough that it marks your lines nicely. But Bohin, I mean, there's other companies that put them out, but make sure it's chalk. And as you're working, you may have to remark because this does rub off. If you make a mistake in marking, you can erase it. You might have to scrub a little bit at it, especially if you mark them pretty dark. But you can erase it and remark it. And it comes off very easily with water. It just, in fact, it wears off when I'm stitching. I often have to remark because it wore off. And that's why I like it, because I know it's not going to. I got it off of Amazon. And I think you can get them at Joann's. I'm not sure about like Hobby Lobby or some of the other places, but any sewing store should have them. You can also get different color chalks. If you're going to stitch on a dark fabric, there is a yellow chalk, there is a white, there's green, and there's gray. I would suggest do not get the gray, because that one does not come off as easily for some reason. Yellow, if you're going to need to mark a dark fabric, the yellow or the white is fine. There's another brand of pencil, and honest to gosh, I can't remember what that one is. They have a pink chalk that goes in there, but I can't remember which one that is. But that is just as good. Anything that has the chalk in it. You don't want ink. You don't. Yeah. Absolutely don't use ink, and don't use regular pencil. Chalk pencils are fine, but don't use a regular pencil. And I will tell you from experience, it does not come out. I did a piece my husband asked me to do for a friend of his who did us a bit of a favor, and he wanted to give him something for it. So I stitched a full coverage piece for him, and I used some pencil, regular lead pencil, to mark things. And yeah, you can see the pencil lines. So I was not real happy about that. But at that point, there wasn't anything I could do, and I tried to erase them, and I couldn't erase them. Now, fortunately, they were very light, so you had to look to notice them because they were very light. But I'm gonna switch so you don't have to look at that. There. Fortunately, they were light enough that they didn't hit you in the face when you looked at it. But if you look close, you could see that there were pencil lines there, and that bothered me. But at this point, or at the point that it was done, it's like, what can you do? It's done. You did it. It is what it is. And to be honest, he never noticed. He was so happy with the piece. He never noticed that there were pencil lines there. But Bohin, it's the way to go. As I said, you can erase it. It washes out easily. And I have gridded my own fabric with this. I just got some plain old 20 count fabric, and I marked the grid myself. So, and it washes out. So you don't have to buy the pre-gridded. It's nice because you don't have to spend that time, and that's time that you won't be stitching. You'll be marking fabric. But with a pencil, it really doesn't take long, and you don't have to grid the whole thing at one time, especially when you know that this is going to rub off and you're going to end up having to remark things. So I would only grid small areas at a time, and you didn't. You didn't. Knew I wasn't going to jump forever. Um, so I didn't need to grid from here to way over here because I was going to carry my thread that far. I would only maybe grid at best a page at a time. Yvonne, yes, I actually do use white fabric or a cream color fabric when I'm doing full coverage. Um, Simply because it's all going to be covered up. So, and I know there are people that use dyed fabrics on their full coverage, say, and that to me is great if you're not stitching the background and you want to replace the background with a hand dyed fabric. That's wonderful. Um, I have not done that, and I always just use white or cream because to me, and again, this is just me and just my opinion. Why why use a piece of really nice hand dyed fabric when you're just going to cover it all up with your piece, with your stitching? That I can't wrap my head around. So I will use, as I said, white or off white when I'm doing. Um, um, how do I start and end my stitches on my long dog samplers? The same way I do on the full coverage. I'm doing my death by cross stitch on 22 count hard hanger fabric, and I will end with a pin stitch. Either that or I'll just flip it over and work it under a couple threads. Uh, when I start a thread, I leave a little bit of a tail, come up in my bottom left, go down in my top right, come up in my bottom right, and make sure I caught that tail because it really only takes one stitch to hold it in place, and go on from there. It just leaves a little um, a little tail on the back. You can trim it if you want, or hopefully it gets caught up in your next stitches. Well, M&M's, how are you? I just watched your video last night. It was very good. I enjoyed it very, very much. Yeah, Candy, I agree too. To me, I don't want to use um, a good piece of fabric to cover it up completely. Joyce, you make a good point. Um, a tailor's pencil and will it come out? I've not used them, to be perfectly honest, and I think you're absolutely correct that some of them are meant to be to be used on the wrong side, so that it doesn't matter if they don't come out. And honestly, no matter what you're going to use, whether it be the blue washable markers that people use to grid, whether it be the bowhin chalk, whether it be the prim pencils, whether it be a lot of people use the their ink pens and it comes out with heat. Fric- friction pens that you can iron over it then and the lines disappear. No matter what you're using, test it first. Take a piece of, do it in the corner of your fabric, or take a small piece of the same fabric and test it. Put some marks on it. Wash, um, wash it and see, does it come out? It sounds like you have a lot to be excited about, Ymir. I was anxious to see what you have up your sleeve. Yeah. Loop start, loop stitch to start, but I used 14 count. You can use a loop start on 14 count. Yeah, there's nothing. Well, it depends. Are you going to use 2 strands or are you going to use 3 strands on your 14 count? It just all depends on what you're going to use. Um, you can, and I have videos on that. And again, I credit Joyce for that, of how to start with an odd number of threads. How to do a loop start with 1 thread of floss, or with 3 threads, 3 strands of floss. Um, there is a way. So, yeah, loop starts are great if you're using an even number of strands. So if you're going to use 2, 4, God forbid that you would use 6, you would probably be stitching on, what is that, 6 count Herda fabric, where you would have to use all 6. I had some of that one time when I was teaching my daughter how to cross stitch, of which she never stuck with. She takes too long for her. She'd rather read a book, and that's fine. That's fine. But yeah, that we used all 6 on. But yeah, loop starts are great, and pin stitches are wonderful. So, is there any other questions I can answer for people? I think we kind of covered the which corner to start in thing. So I hope that was helpful for everybody. Um, it just, you have to think about what direction do you like to stitch, which direction is your first leg, and then either work your diagonal top down or bottom up, so that you can um, so that you can come up in the right holes and have a neater look. Oh, oh, Joyce, I don't know why I was thinking you did both. I forgot about that. See, this old brain, it forgets things. But yes, the loop finish, yeah, Joyce adapted that for to be able to finish with the loop. And and yeah, that's if I'm doing when I'm working on full coverage, I will use that to finish. Um, I don't always say like on a long dog because you have to be careful because you need that little tacking stitch. Um, so you have to be careful of where how you carry your thread and where you're going to place that so that it gets stitched over. So it's much easier to do that on a full coverage piece as opposed to a piece that's not full coverage. So, so I'm trying to think. I don't really have anything else for today unless you guys have some questions or something else that you want to discuss. I'm glad all of you joined me today. It's always a fun time when people are here, and to be honest, I like doing the live videos a whole lot better. No, I mean not that I don't like doing pre-recorded ones, but I do like the live ones because there is more interaction and we can talk about things that you folks want to talk about or answer questions that you folks have because there's always questions out there in the my Facebook group. There's always people looking for information on how to do this or how to do that. So I try to gear videos to be able to help people do or figure out how to do the things that they want to do. Again, not that I know everything because I certainly don't. I am not a professional, and I try and say that every video because I'm not a professional. I'm just someone who has stitched for a very, 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 very long time. Most of my adult years. Well, I can't say that. I should say all of my adult years. Um, done a lot of stitching over the years. Gave a lot away, have a lot hanging. But I do appreciate each and every one of you. If you use gridded fabric, you need to get wet to remove your threads. It would be advisable that your threads are color fast, Barb. DMC, if you're doing full coverage, DMC is color fast, and you're using DMC that's color fast. I don't know about other ones. Your grid line's not threads. I'm not sure what you mean, Barbara. If you're going to make it wet, yes, if you're going to make it wet, your thread needs to be color fast. Um, and even some color fast threads do tend to bleed. Now, I will tell you this. If the color bleeds, don't let it dry. because if it dries, then those, and Ymir, please correct me here if I'm wrong, because you dye thread, so you're probably more up on this than I am. Um, if you let it dry, those dye molecules will attach to your fabric and color the fabric, and you won't be able to get them out. If you don't let it dry, you can keep rinsing and rinsing and rinsing until, worst case scenario, you can at least get them much lighter than when they originally stained. Um, Vicki Clayton is now dyeing silks again, and I actually know Vicki personally. In fact, I helped her out at shows here locally back when, well, before she stopped dyeing silk, and now she is again. But uh, I'm in Pennsylvania, and there was a show in Lancaster, Jubilee celebrations. I can't remember what it was called. But she had told me that to prevent the loose dye from attaching to your fabric, you can use a product that's called Synthropol. SyntHropol. And you can buy it on Amazon. And if you use that, that is one of, somehow it, I don't know all the chemical stuff behind it, but somehow it prevents those loose molecules from attaching to the fabric. So I have that, and whenever I am washing a piece, I put that in. I usually use Dreft laundry detergent, just a little bit, and the Synthropol. Dreft because it has a chemical in it called sodium perborate, and sodium perborate is an oxidizing agent, and that helps brighten your piece up again. I mean, because, okay, Stitcher's Retreat, we all know I worked on that for over 5 years. So till the end of 5 years, that puppy was pretty grungy, just from, carrying it around, working on it here. It went to retreats with me, went a lot of places with me. So by the end of 5 years, it needed a bath really bad. So I used a little bit of Dreft detergent. And for those of us that are my age, we used that to wash baby diapers back in the day to get them white again. So it cleans your, and I had a mentor that I worked with, and she was an EGA, Embroiderers Guild of America teacher. She was certified to teach needlework, and she's the one that told me to use Dreft or the sodium perborate. And I was doing some heart hanger embroidery, and she said if you use that, it just brightens it right back up again. So that's what I've always used, and I always put some Synthropol in because, as Vicki told me, that helps to prevent those loose dye molecules from attaching to the fabric. So between those two things, I, knock on wood, have never had a problem with my threads running or staining uh, my base fabric. I have not had a problem with that. Yes, Ymir, you're absolutely right. Between the Synthropol and or Orvis, which is also good, yeah, a little goes a very long way. In fact, my bottle of Synthropol is maybe, I want to say it's either an 8 or a 12-ounce bottle, and I've had it for years, years. And it's still, I still have plenty. I can wash my pieces for a couple more years. Yep, Barbara. Yes, draft and baby diapers. Been there, done that. We didn't have so much in the, well, I guess disposable diapers were coming into being when my daughter was little, but yeah, baby diapers and rubber pants. That was the thing. Again, but I'll tell you what, it cleans your needlework awful nice. Awful nice. So, well, as I said, I'm running out of stuff here unless you guys have some more questions or things you want to talk about or or no. But if not, I think then I'm gonna call it a day. It's 2:30 in the afternoon here. Yes, sewing thread. Kathy, did you have trouble removing the sewing thread when you gridded with it? Because your needle could pierce that, and um, regular, I'm talking regular sewing thread, like your Coats and Clark or whatever sewing thread. Um, I would worry about removing that grid after I was done stitching, because I would be afraid my needle pierced it and then it would be hard to get out. Thanks for stopping by, Candy. We'll see you next time. A lot of people use sulky sliver. Fran, the gridding on the easy grid, it depends on what count you get. If you, but this is 20 count, and the gray line is actually between the stitches. 25 count, it's actually, you either use it as stitch number 1 or stitch number 10. So it is right on a fabric thread. So it depends on the count that you're getting. Most of them, it is right on the fabric thread. 20 count and I think 18 count, it is between the fabric threads. But the other counts, it's on. How much is a little drift? I would say maybe, probably around a tablespoon or so. Kathy, you take, or Cindy, Candy, you take care too. I'm really glad you stopped by. Yeah, Elizabeth, that's what I was going to say. A lot use sulky sliver to grid with, and that just pulls right out. And I think you're right. I think that is like a metallic thread. Yeah, that always whenever people talk about pulling their grid lines out after they've used sulky sliver, it always reminds me of, again, back in the day when we used waste canvas, um, because I can remember I did it for Christmas presents one year. I stitched on sweatshirts and gave them as Christmas gifts to family members. And I think my dad, I stitched a cardigan on a cardigan, and he was a Mason, so I did the Masonic emblem on a cardigan for him. And we used waste canvas, and boy, oh boy, that could be a bear to get out, because if you would just nick it a little bit and it would get stuck, and we'd have to make it wet, and you'd sit there and pull and hope you were getting it all out. But yeah, that puts me to mind of that. But it's nice that the metallic threads, just you can't pierce them, so you don't have that problem with that pulling out. Yeah. Okay, well, I think we're going to call it a day then. And I just want to say, oh, somebody's calling me. Thank you all for stopping by and spending your time with me. And hopefully, if you've seen things you like, you'll hit the subscribe button and the notification button so that you get a notice when I'm online again. And with that, I'm going to say thank you to each and every one of you for being here, and for hanging out with me, and for coming back time after time. And for new people, I hope you enjoyed what you had here, or what we've done here today, and that you continue to drop by. So, with that, my friends, love you all. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you next time. Have a great day. Good weekend. Bye bye.